writes for the New York Post. He has a piece in the Post Millennial right now. He also writes for the Federalist. He's a very busy guy, and I'm very happy to have him on. David, thank you so much for joining the Grace Curley Show.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, David, I love this piece you wrote for the Post Millennial because you had tweeted out an excerpt of this earlier, and it really stuck with me. You said there will be no VE Day style celebrations to mark the end of our pandemic lockdowns, no long kisses in Times Square, no parades or feats of strength. This is because for much of the country, this particular war is over, and for much of the rest, it may never end. Let's talk about that. You asked the question in this, when is this going to be over? Do you have any idea? Do you have any guesses at this point?
No. Well, the only thing I can say is it's going to be over at different points in different places, and to some extent, it already is. So this is going to vary very much by state to state. It really has the whole time. But the one thing that I realized in writing this piece, and I was very happy that the Post Millennial let me write it because it really is, a somewhat esoteric piece, but I just wanted to answer that question for myself. And what I realized is that this is going to have nothing to do with metrics. For weeks now, Tucker Carlson, Jim Jordan, all kinds of people have been saying, okay, what are the numbers we have to hit? How many people have to be vaccinated? How low do the cases be? What is it? Give us any metric to get back to normal. And it clearly doesn't exist, and it's never going to exist. The New York Times, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, ran a piece that said, we're never getting herd immunity, right? So however this is going to end is going to have to be more like a story, more like ending a story, more like ending a narrative that we're telling ourselves than some number that we're going to hit, because that number just doesn't exist.
Yeah, and what you're making me think of is my boss here, she one time said to me, someday you'll be telling your kids, I'm 28, I don't have kids, but she said, someday you'll be telling your kids about this time, and you'll be saying, and we wore masks, and we did all this. And I said to her, I hope I'll be telling them about it in the past tense, and not like putting a mask on their faces and saying, well, it all started in 2020 and that's when this began. But I always had that feeling. I'm like, I don't know if there is an end date to this. It seems like it could go on forever.
Yeah, from the very beginning, we had that very nefarious term, new normal, come up, right? Oh, well, we're going to have a new normal. The problem that I have right now is I don't have the slightest idea who's deciding what this new normal is going to be. I know that I'm not particularly involved in it. Nobody that I know is. And my fear is that this new normal is being created by, big tech companies and the mainstream media and school teachers unions. And I'm nervous about what this new normal is going to look like. And the longer it takes us to get back to any kind of normal, the more restrictive that new normal is going to be.
I would totally agree with you. And speaking of big tech, you also have a piece in the New York Post about Facebook and the oversight board that decided that Trump should stay banned for another 6 months. Can you break down for my listeners, because I haven't spent too much time on this story, exactly who makes up this fair and balanced oversight board?
It's a rather motley crew. It includes a former Danish prime minister. It includes a former editor from the left-wing British Guardian newspaper. There's some law professors. There's a Pakistani digital rights advocate. So if you were concerned that there weren't any Pakistani digital rights activists, advocates, they're in there. No, it's a strange international crew of mostly extremely progressive people, many of whom have just openly criticized Trump on Twitter and in other places. It's extremely unfriendly to conservative views and specifically to Trump. And it's just so unrepresentative of America that it's ridiculous that these people would be making a choice about whether the American people get to hear from the former president or not.
Yeah, and it's not a jury of his peers, as you point out. It's a lot of people who have history, whether it's on Facebook or tweeting or, part of their speeches of talking about how much they dislike Donald Trump. You couldn't really get a group of people who were more anti-Trump than that oversight board. Another thing I did want to ask you about here is I have a question about the press right now. I know that you watch a lot of these press briefings, and I know that you're probably not surprised at how the press is handling Jen Psaki and Joe Biden and kind of giving them the softball treatment. But David, sometimes I have to wonder, I'm like, at what point do we just start calling them out on inaccuracies? I mean, I would say lies, but I know that's not a word we like to use anymore in 2021. But some of these things that are coming out of Jen Psaki, blaming what's happening at the border on Donald Trump. And then today we find out that these pie-in-the-sky plans that Joe Biden has for free preschool for everyone and all that stuff, it's going to cost $700 billion more than what he said. Do you think at any point there's a breaking point where these press people say, okay, we actually have to ask them these questions?
No, I don't. I mean, I think you'll continue to see, the rare conservatives in the room. Fox News, occasionally the Journal. I think Phil Wegman from Real Clear Politics does a nice job. But in general, no, of course not. The mainstream media 4 years ago decided that its primary purpose was to get rid of Donald Trump. He's not president anymore, but they certainly haven't gotten rid of him. And they're going to continue to do whatever they can to bolster Joe Biden and his team going forward. So no, I don't see anything that. The only thing that might be able to change their behavior is I saw that CNN has lost half its viewership since Biden took over. So conceivably, there's a point at which it just gets so boring.
Yeah.
That they need to make some money. But short of that, no, I don't think so.
I was actually having that same conversation today with my mom because she was complaining about how nobody asked tough questions. And I said, yeah, but they're reaping what they sow. No one's watching their channels. And their ratings disasters are contagious because then Anderson Cooper goes from CNN to hosting Jeopardy and he brings their ratings down as well. So it does seem like at some point the ratings have to matter. The last thing, I'm speaking with David Marcus from the Federalist, the New York Post, and now the Post Millennial. David, I have to ask you a little bit about this Biden ban on menthol cigarettes. You wrote a great piece on this, and it kind of opened my mind because I'm not a smoker. I didn't really have a strong opinion on it, but you bring up the idea of cigarette smuggling in the United States and how this hasn't been a problem up until now. Anything's possible with Joe Biden. Tell people a little bit about what we have to worry about if this happens.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the fact that menthol cigarettes are more popular in the black community, and so just in general, you're going to have more police interactions if you make this product that more black people use illegal, there is this fear, very legitimate fear, that we could open the door to international smuggling. We don't have international cigarette smuggling in the U.S. We have interstate smuggling, right? So people go to a low-tax state like Virginia, fill up a truck with cigarettes and go sell them in a high tax state like New York. I imagine Massachusetts is probably pretty high. The rest of the world has a real problem with mostly Chinese counterfeit cigarettes that are not regulated at all, that are even worse for you than cigarettes themselves are. We've never had this problem before. This would absolutely be an invitation to it, and I mean, it would just have disastrous consequences. This is an absurd policy. There's no reason to base this on race. There's really no reason to tell Americans that they can't smoke cigarettes, especially at a time when every state in the union is jumping on the smoke marijuana bandwagon. So, I mean, none of it makes any sense.
Yeah, and I like how you wrote, but of course Biden thinks he is doing it for black people's own good, because there is an element of that. Oh, we're protecting you from your own bad choices, which just seems very un-American to me.
It's insulting and paternalistic. I mean, what is Biden saying here? I mean, is Biden saying that the predominantly, white people who smoke Marlboro Lights are in a better position to make this choice than black people who smoke Newports? I mean, if they thought about this for 2 seconds, they'd realize that it's racist. But, at this point, the progressives look at the world in a very different way.
Yes, I agree. David Marcus, thank you very much for joining us. Where can people follow you on Twitter and read all your stuff?
Blue Box Dave.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, guys, when we get back, we will be talking more about this. I'll open up the phone lines. Whatever you guys want to talk about is fair game. I also have a little sound from a Karen interaction that I think you guys might enjoy. There's more and more of these, Jared. People are getting feisty. It's getting warm out. People want the new normal to be right now. We'll be back. This is the Grace Curley Show.
You can call her late for dinner. Just don't call her Gracie. It's the Grace Curley Show.